Wrote an article, three things to know about the Cardinals. We'll run through them and then talk a little bit about them. Homecoming for multiple Cardinals, although Joshua Dobbs no longer part of that. Early season buzz has worn off, and the run game powers the Arizona offense. So take us through that.
Well, number one, you kind of alluded to it that it was expected to be a homecoming, and obviously some of that's worn off with Josh Dobbs getting traded from the Cardinals to the Vikings. Obviously, Jonathan Gannon even saying, the day before the trade that Dobbs wasn't going to start was interesting because he had started all 8 games. He hadn't been great, but he'd been, at least, a solid, player. Granted, hasn't made enough winning plays to really do much for the Cardinals. I mean, they're 1-7, but I thought he did at least a solid job in Arizona. As far as the other connections, Cardinals offensive coordinator Drew Petzing, remember he was on Kevin Stefanski's staff for the last couple of seasons, and Jonathan Gannon, their head coach, who I just referenced, a St. Ignatius alum. So it could be an interesting return, back to Cleveland with those guys. So going to number 2. There was some interesting buzz about the Cardinals. People thought they were going to be the worst team in the league, but then, they have a tight game against Washington. They race out to that huge lead against the Giants. They beat the Cowboys in week 3. Then you're sitting there and you're thinking, maybe they're not that bad. But then, they've fallen back down to earth. They've lost 5 straight games. And Sunday's game that lost to Baltimore is the only one of the 5 where they've lost by single digits. Their defense has not been good. They're 30th in opponent quarterback rating, 25th in run defense, 26th in scoring defense. And that's not a surprise. The Cardinals were coming into a massive rebuild entering this season with Monty Ossenfort, the new general manager, trying to kind of rebuild the problems that were left behind. So it's no surprise that, they're kind of in the beginning stages of this build, and they need more picks. They need more drafts, more time to really to show themselves. And I think, unfortunately for them, it just kind of showed and just, them not perform well. But number 3, and this will probably also take a hit also without Josh Dobbs being in the lineup, the Cardinals have actually been pretty good at running the football. 7 of their 8 games have gotten 100 yards rushing, and the only time they didn't was when they had 96 yards in week 1 against Washington. They're 6th in the NFL in rushing at 139 yards a game, and tied for second in net yards. And they've done that without James Conner the last few games. He's missed the last 3 with a knee injury. He won't play on Sunday, but they got a young back in Amari DiMercato, who people might remember from the Fiesta Bowl from TCU when he ran through the Michigan defense in the absence of Kendre Miller. He's done a solid job, 49 carries, 195 yards and a touchdown. Rondale Moore, their talented receiver, has been used at times in the run game. He's got 17 carries, 147 yards. Dobbs not being there means they may run. They don't have that quarterback run threat, but they've been able to run the football at least a little bit and present a little bit of problems there.
All right. So the question is, who concerns you from the Cardinals? How do the Browns win the game?
Well, I think from a Browns perspective, it just comes down to just kind of just trying to get out ahead early and kind of stay ahead. Get out in front. Don't try to give a young team confidence, because when you look at this Cardinals team, yeah, they're not very good, but there's some solid players. Looking at their team, Kazir White has had a pretty solid season with almost 70 tackles. Marco Wilson, they got a promising young corner who's had some flash. I really like Hollywood Brown and their receiving core. Zach Ertz has proven to be a solid tight end, although he is kind of on the backside of the career. But when I look at the Cardinals, the one thing that worries me is, at 1-7, they don't have a lot to lose at this point. They're the worst. They have the worst record in the NFL right now. They haven't been good. And we've seen throughout the season, the NFL, you never sleep on the underdogs. I mean, just ask the Kansas City Chiefs just a few days ago, who lost to the Broncos in Denver. The Browns have been the Niners. This Cardinals team took care of the Dallas Cowboys at home and, held them to 1 touchdown and 5 red zone trips. So you really can't underestimate anybody in the NFL. So the Browns need to kind of get out to a good start and kind of try and, play from in front and really make. And I think the faster they start, the more pressure you put Arizona in, the better chance you have to pull away. Because I think the worst thing you can do against an underdog is to let them hang around the game as long as possible.